The Galactic Council chambers had seen many species plead for their lives over the millennia. The vast circular amphitheater, carved from a single crystal formation on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Today, however, something was different. The representatives from nearly every known species in the galaxy sat in their designated seats, their various forms of communication creating a low hum of anxiety that filled the crystalline air. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the chamber, her simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate robes, exoskeletons, and energy fields that adorned the alien delegates around her. She was alone. No guards, no advisors, no technological displays of power. Just one human woman standing before the collected might of 3,000 species. High Chancellor Zektar of the Hegemony leaned forward in his ornate seat, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his kind. The massive creature's scales caught the light streaming through the chamber's transparent dome, creating an intimidating display of iridescent authority. Human, Zektar's voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every delegate in their native tongue. You stand accused of the most heinous crimes against galactic peace. Your species has violated the sacred accords of non-interference 17 times in the past solar cycle. You have disrupted established trade routes, interfered with primitive species development, and, worst of all, you have refused to pay the reparations demanded by this council. Elena remained silent, her dark eyes scanning the assembled delegates with an expression that seemed almost amused. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. Several delegates shifted in their seats, their various breathing apparatus and life support systems creating a symphony of mechanical sounds. Do you have nothing to say in your defense? Zektar continued, his voice carrying a note of irritation. Your species has been given every opportunity to comply with galactic law. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Finally, Elena spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, and carried easily through the chamber without need for amplification. I'm sorry, High Chancellor, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. We haven't come here to defend ourselves. A ripple of confusion swept through the chamber. Translator matrices struggled with the nuances of her words, creating a cascade of clicks, whistles, and harmonic frequencies as delegates sought clarification from their advisors. Ambassador Thrix of the Cetian Empire, a tall, ethereal being composed of shifting energy patterns, materialized a communication appendage. Then, why are you here, human? Your species faces complete economic isolation, military action, and potential extinction. Surely you must wish to negotiate. Elena smiled, and something about that expression made several of the more sensitive empathic species recoil slightly. We're here to pay what we owe. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. High Chancellor Zektar's massive head tilted to one side, his predatory instincts suddenly alert. In his long career overseeing galactic affairs, he had learned to recognize when prey was about to become a predator. Something in the human's tone triggered ancient warnings in his brain. The reparations demanded total 847 billion galactic credits. Zektar said slowly. Your entire species' economic output for the past century wouldn't cover even a fraction of that amount. What game are you playing, human? No game, Elena replied. She reached into her jacket and withdrew a small device that looked deceptively simple. It was a standard galactic data pad, unremarkable in every way. Everything we owe is right here. She placed the device on the ceremonial table at the center of the chamber. The movement was casual, almost dismissive, but every delegate in the chamber felt a sudden chill. The device lay there, innocent and small, but the human's confidence was unnerving. Ambassador Kilrix of the Vorthan Collective, a massive insectoid creature with compound eyes that could process millions of calculations per second, spoke in rapid clicks. Impossible. Our economic analysts have studied your species extensively. You lack the industrial capacity, the resource base, or the technological infrastructure to produce such wealth. This is clearly a desperate attempt to buy time. Elena's smile widened. You're absolutely right, Ambassador Kilrix. We don't have that kind of wealth. We never did. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we know who does. The chamber erupted. Thousands of delegates began speaking simultaneously, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that overwhelmed even the sophisticated translation matrix. Emergency sessions were called, security protocols activated, and several species began broadcasting urgent messages to their homeworlds. Through it all, Elena stood calmly in the center of the storm, waiting. High Chancellor Zektar slammed his massive fist against his control panel, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. Slowly, quiet returned. When he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous edge. Explain yourself, human. What do you mean? I mean that for the past 3 years, while you've all been so focused on cataloging our alleged crimes and calculating our debts, we've been conducting our own investigation. Elena gestured to the datapad. 17 violations of the Sacred Accords, you say. Interference with primitive species, disruption of trade routes, failure to respect established territories. All true. But here's what's interesting. Every single one of those violations was us cleaning up messes that other species made first. Ambassador Thrix's energy patterns flickered with agitation. Preposterous. The evidence clearly shows human involvement in the Kepler incident. Elena interrupted smoothly. We were accused of introducing advanced technology to a pre-spaceflight civilization. What the investigation failed to mention was that we were recovering hegemony mining equipment that had been abandoned there 50 years earlier. The primitive species had already reverse-engineered it. We were preventing them from developing weapons of mass destruction. Several hegemony delegates exchanged glances. This information had not been included in their reports to the Council. The Tau Ceti trade route disruption, Elena continued. We were accused of attacking legitimate merchant vessels. Those merchants were Vorthan collective slavers trafficking sentient beings from 12 different species. The cargo manifests are all in the datapad. Ambassador Kilrix's compound eyes focused intently on the human. His species was known for their meticulous record-keeping and absolute honesty in business dealings. The suggestion that some of his people might be involved in illegal activities was deeply disturbing. The Rigel colony interference, Elena pressed on. We were accused of violating the territorial sovereignty of the Setian Empire. We were actually stopping a genocide. The colony wasn't Setian at all. It was a refugee camp for survivors of the Andromedan War, and certain parties wanted them eliminated before they could testify about war crimes. The chamber had fallen completely silent now. Even the various life support systems seemed muted. Elena walked slowly around the ceremonial table, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Shall I continue? Because we have documentation for all 17 incidents. Video evidence, recorded communications, financial records, detailed analysis of every single situation where humanity was accused of wrongdoing. She stopped and looked directly at High Chancellor Zektar. Would you like to know what we found? The massive reptilian leader's scales had lost some of their iridescent sheen. Continue. We found a pattern. Every single incident involved cover-ups, illegal activities, or outright crimes committed by member species of this very council. We weren't the criminals. We were the witnesses. And witnesses, as any lawyer will tell you, can be very inconvenient. Elena returned to the center of the chamber and placed her hand on the datapad. So yes, High Chancellor, we're here to pay our debt. But not the debt you think we owe. We're here to collect on the debt the galaxy owes us. The datapad activated with a soft chime. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, visible from every seat. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showing massive corruption networks spanning dozens of species. Communication intercepts revealing systematic cover-ups of war crimes. Video documentation of atrocities that have been blamed on natural disasters or primitive conflicts. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Elena said next. For 3 years, we've been gathering this evidence. For 3 years, we've been patient. We followed proper channels. We filed reports with council oversight committees. We requested formal investigations. Do you know what happened to those requests? She paused, scanning the faces around her. Many delegates couldn't meet her eyes. They disappeared, buried in bureaucratic red tape, lost in administrative shuffles, delayed pending additional review. Meanwhile, the crimes continued. The cover-ups expanded, and humanity became the convenient scapegoat for everything that went wrong in council space. Ambassador Thrix's energy form flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. These are serious accusations. If you have proof of wrongdoing, the proper procedure is to the proper procedure, Elena interrupted, her voice suddenly cold, is what we followed for 3 years. The proper procedure failed, so we decided to try a different approach. She reached into her other jacket pocket and withdrew a second device. This one was clearly of human manufacture, sleek and unfamiliar to the assembled delegates. You want to talk about debt? Let's talk about real debt. Every species in this chamber has benefited from what you call galactic civilization. Trade routes protected by council forces. Disputes resolved by council arbitration. Scientific knowledge shared through council databases. All of it funded by membership fees and maintained by collective agreement. Elena activated the second device. New holographic displays appeared, these ones showing complex economic and strategic analyses. But here's what's interesting about galactic civilization. It's completely dependent on trade routes that pass through human space. 87% of all intersector commerce relies on hyperspace jump points controlled by human colonies. 93% of all emergency supply routes. 100% of the fast communication networks that keep this council functioning. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates immediately began consulting with their advisors, frantically calculating the economic impact of what the human was suggesting. High Chancellor Zektar leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You wouldn't dare. Dare what? Elena asked innocently. Close our borders? Deny passage to ships involved in criminal enterprises? Refuse to provide aid and comfort to fugitives from justice? These are all perfectly legal actions under galactic law. In fact, they're required when evidence of criminal activity exists. The chamber erupted again, but this time the tone was different. Instead of confusion or indignation, there was fear. Real, palpable fear as the implications sank in. Without human cooperation, galactic civilization would collapse in a matter of months. Trade would halt. Communications would fail. The careful balance of power that had maintained peace for centuries would crumble overnight. Ambassador Kilrix's voice cut through the chaos, his clicks rapid and urgent. This is economic terrorism. You cannot hold the entire galaxy hostage over these allegations. Allegations? Elena's laugh was sharp and bitter. Ambassador, the evidence is right there in front of you. Financial records with your species' encryption signatures. Communication logs with verified timestamps. Physical evidence collected by our own investigators. This isn't about allegations anymore. She gestured to the data pad again, and the displays shifted to show a massive financial network. Credits flowing between accounts, bribes, and kickbacks, entire economies built on corruption and exploitation. At the center of it all were the species represented in this very chamber. For 50 years, you've been systematically looting the galaxy, exploiting primitive species, covering up genocide, trafficking in sentient beings, using the Council's authority to legitimize your crimes and eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. Elena's voice rose, carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. And when humanity started asking questions, you decided to destroy us instead of addressing the problems. High Chancellor Zektar was silent for a long moment, his predatory eyes fixed on the human diplomat. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. What do you want? Justice, Elena replied simply. Every species involved in these crimes will face prosecution. Every stolen credit will be returned to its rightful owners. Every victim will receive compensation. Every cover-up will be exposed. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And humanity will no longer be the galaxy's scapegoat. And if we refuse? Ambassador Thrix asked, though his energy patterns indicated he already knew the answer. Elena smiled again, and this time there was no warmth in it at all. Then you'll discover what happens when humanity stops being patient. The chamber fell silent. Outside the transparent dome, the twin sons of Nexus Prime continued their eternal dance, casting shifting shadows across the assembled delegates. But inside the chamber, something fundamental had changed. The balance of power that had ruled the galaxy for millennia had just shifted, and everyone present knew it. High Chancellor Zektar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Security, arrest this human for threatening galactic peace. Elena didn't resist as the Council's enforcement officers approached. She didn't need to. As the energy restraints settled around her wrists, she spoke quietly, but her words carried to every corner of the chamber. You have 48 hours. For what? Sektar demanded. To decide whether you want to pay your debts voluntarily, Elena replied. After that, we start collecting them ourselves. The human diplomat was led away, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Behind her, she left chaos. Delegates argued frantically with their advisors. Emergency communications were sent to home worlds. Military alerts were issued. But through it all, one thing was clear. The game had changed, and humanity had just announced they were no longer playing by the old rules. In the depths of human space, aboard a vessel that didn't officially exist, Admiral Sarachun received a coded transmission. 3 words that she had been waiting 3 years to hear. Payment is due. She turned to her bridge crew, men and women who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Operation Debt Collection is now active. Send the signal to all ships. It's time to collect what the galaxy owes us. Across human space, ships began to move. Not the sleek diplomatic vessels that the galaxy was familiar with, but something else entirely. Ships that had been hidden for decades, built in secret, armed with technology that the Council had never seen. Ships crewed by humans who had lost everything to the corruption and cover-ups, who had nothing left to lose. The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson. When you push humanity too far, they don't just push back. They bring the entire structure down around your ears. And in the depths of space, something that had been sleeping for far too long began to wake up. The human war machine that had conquered their own savage world, that had learned to fight and went against impossible odds, that had spent centuries being peaceful only because no one had given them a reason to remember what they really were. The galaxy had just given them that reason. High Chancellor Zektar sat alone in his private chambers hours after the council session had ended, staring at the evidence that Elena Vasquez had left behind. The data was damning, irrefutable, and terrifying in its scope. But what worried him most wasn't the evidence of corruption or the threat of economic collapse. What worried him was the look he had seen in the human's eyes. It wasn't anger or hatred or even righteous indignation. It was the cold, calculated expression of someone who had already decided what they were going to do and was simply going through the motions of diplomacy before they did it. Zektar had seen that look before, in his youth when his people had still been warriors instead of politicians. It was the look of a predator that had finished stalking its prey and was about to strike. The look of someone who had already won the war and was just waiting for their enemies to realize it. For the first time in his long career, the High Chancellor of the Galactic Council was afraid, not of what humanity might do, but of what they had already done. Because if the humans had spent 3 years gathering evidence, what else had they been doing during that time? The answer to that question was currently moving through hyperspace at maximum speed, heading for targets that had been selected years in advance. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, or their courage, or even their adaptability. It was their ability to hold a grudge. And they've been holding this one for a very long time. The countdown had begun. 47 hours and 36 minutes until the galaxy learned what happened when humanity finally decided to collect what was owed to them. The council chambers were empty now, but the crystalline structure seemed to resonate with tension, as if the very building knew that everything was about to change. The peaceful order that had governed galactic civilization for millennia was cracking, and at the center of those cracks was a simple truth that no one had wanted to acknowledge. Humanity had been keeping score. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the HMS Retribution, watching the tactical display with a calm focus that had made her the youngest fleet commander in human history. Around her, the most advanced warship humanity had ever built hummed with barely contained energy. The ship was a masterwork of engineering that had never appeared on any official registry, funded by black budgets, and built in shipyards that officially didn't exist. Admiral Commander Marcus Webb reported from the communication station. We're receiving confirmation signals from all task forces. Operation Debt Collection is proceeding on schedule. She nodded without taking her eyes off the display. Scattered across the galaxy, hidden human forces were moving into position. For 3 years, while the Council had been focused on their show trials and political maneuvering, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Ships had been positioned, intelligence gathered, and, most importantly, debts had been cataloged. Every crime, every cover-up, every instance of corruption that had been ignored or buried. Humanity had documented it all, traced the money, identified the perpetrators, and calculated exactly what was owed to the victims. Now it was time for collection. Status report on the hegemony mining operations in the Kepler system. Chen asked. Task Force Alpha is in position, Admiral. Captain Rodriguez reports all 27 illegal mining platforms are being monitored. The hegemony defense fleet consists of 12 outdated cruisers and 36 patrol ships. No match for our stealth frigates. Chen smiled grimly. The hegemony had grown complacent, relying on council authority rather than actual strength. Their ships were designed for intimidation and patrol work against primitive species, not warfare against an equal opponent. They were about to learn the difference. And the Vorthan Collective Slave Operations. Task Force Beta has identified 43 trafficking vessels in 7 different systems. Captain Kim's destroyers are standing by. The slaves include over 12,000 sentient beings from 18 different species. Excellent. What about the Setian Empire's genocide sites? Commander Webb's expression darkened. Task Force Gamma has located the mass graves on Rigel 7. The evidence is overwhelming, Admiral. Over 2 million refugees from the Andromedan War. Men, women, children, all executed and buried in unmarked sites. Chen's jaw tightened. The Setian Empire had always presented themselves as the moral leaders of the galaxy, the peaceful energy beings who had transcended physical violence. The reality was far uglier. When the Andromedan refugees had tried to testify about war crimes, the Setians had simply eliminated them and blamed their disappearance on voluntary relocation to distant worlds. Time until Elena's deadline expires. 34 hours, 18 minutes. Any response from the Council? Negative. High Chancellor Zektar has ordered increased security around Council facilities and issued warrants for Ambassador Vasquez's extradition to Hegemony Space for enhanced interrogation. They're treating this as a bluff. Chun turned away from the tactical display to face her bridge crew. These were not the fresh-faced idealists who had joined the diplomatic corps, believing in galactic unity and peaceful coexistence. These were veterans of humanity's shadow wars, the conflicts that never made it into official histories. Men and women who had learned hard lessons about the true nature of galactic civilization. They still don't understand what they're dealing with, Chin said quietly. They think we're just another primitive species throwing a tantrum. They're about to learn otherwise. She activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is Admiral Chun. In approximately 34 hours, we will commence the largest debt collection operation in galactic history. For 3 years, we have watched as the Council covered up genocide, slavery, and systematic exploitation. We have seen our own people blamed for crimes they didn't commit while the real perpetrators escaped justice. The bridge was completely silent as her words echoed through the ship's corridors. Today that ends. We're not here for conquest. We're not here for revenge. We are here to collect what is owed. Every stolen credit, every murdered innocent, every covered-up crime. The galaxy has run up a debt that it can no longer ignore, and humanity is here to collect. Meanwhile, in the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, the emergency session had been in continuous operation for 18 hours. Delegates argued, shouted, and, in some cases, physically fought as the implications of Elena's evidence continued to sink in. The carefully maintained facade of galactic civilization was crumbling in real time. Ambassador Kilrix had spent the last 6 hours reviewing the evidence of Vorthan collective involvement in slave trafficking. The data was irrefutable, but more disturbing was the scope of the operation. His own people, the species he had represented with pride for 40 years, were revealed to be running the largest slavery network in galactic history. The financial records are genuine, his chief analyst reported, his compound eyes dim with exhaustion and shame. The encryption signatures match our most secure systems. The communication logs have been verified. Our people have been trafficking sentience for at least 70 years. Kilrix slumped in his ceremonial seat, the weight of revelation crushing his spirit. How many? Conservative estimate? 40 million individuals from over 200 species. The profit margins are substantial. And the humans knew? They have documentation going back decades. Ship manifests, cargo listings, even video evidence of loading operations. They know everything. Across the chamber, similar conversations were taking place. The hegemony's illegal mining operations had strip-mined dozens of protected worlds, destroying entire ecosystems and displacing primitive species. The Setian Empire's peaceful expansion had involved the systematic genocide of anyone who might challenge their territorial claims. Smaller species have been complicit in money laundering, weapon smuggling, and a dozen other crimes. High Chancellor Zektar surveyed the chaos with growing unease. His own species was implicated in the worst crimes of all. The hegemony hadn't just participated in illegal activities, they had organized them. The evidence showed a systematic campaign to exploit and control primitive species throughout the galaxy, using Council authority as cover. But what worried him most was what the evidence didn't show. There were gaps in the human intelligence, places where their information stopped abruptly. It was as if humanity had deliberately limited their investigation to certain areas while ignoring others entirely. Chief Intelligence Officer Yithran, he called out, his voice cutting through the cacophony. Analysis of the human evidence. What's missing? The slender intelligence specialist consulted his data tablet rapidly. Several concerning omissions. High Chancellor. No intelligence on military capabilities, ship movements, or strategic resources. No evidence of human crimes despite our extensive documentation. Most significantly, no information about their current operational status. Meaning they were collecting evidence of our crimes while carefully concealing their own capabilities. This suggests a level of operational security that we have severely underestimated. Zektar's blood ran cold. In his species' warrior past, the sign of a truly dangerous enemy was not the one who revealed their strength, but the one who successfully hid it while learning yours. If humanity had been conducting intelligence operations for 3 years without detection, what else had they been doing? How long until we can mobilize the Council defense fleet? Minimum 18 hours for the first battle group. 72 hours for full deployment. And how long until the human deadline? 29 hours. The mathematics of the situation were stark. If the humans were planning military action, they would strike during the gap between their deadline and the arrival of Council forces. It was a classic tactical maneuver, and the fact that they had positioned their ultimatum to exploit this window suggested careful planning. Send priority signals to all member species, Zektar ordered. Full military alert. Activate all defense protocols. And find out where the humans are. But the humans had learned from the galaxy's best teachers, the species now scrambling to defend themselves. For 3 years, humanity had studied galactic military doctrine, communication protocols, and strategic thinking. They had learned from every species' mistakes and successes, incorporating the lessons into their own planning. More importantly, they had done something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. They had planned for war while appearing to seek peace. Captain Maria Rodriguez floated in the zero gravity of her ship's command center, watching the hegemony mining operation on her screens. The illegal platforms were massive structures, each one capable of processing millions of tons of ore per day. They had been strip mining the Kepler system for 50 years, destroying 3 worlds in the process. The primitive species that had originally inhabited the system had been relocated to temporary settlements that had become permanent internment camps. Generations had lived and died in those camps while the hegemony extracted trillions of credits worth of rare minerals from their homeworld. Captain, her weapons officer reported, targeting solutions confirmed on all 27 platforms. The defense fleet is maintaining standard patrol pattern. No indication they're aware of our presence. Rodriguez nodded. The HMS Phantom and her sister ships represented a revolution in military technology. Stealth systems that made them invisible to conventional sensors, weapons that could crack planetary crust, and engines that could outrun anything in known space. The hegemony patrol ships were equivalent to ancient sailing vessels trying to fight modern battleships. Signal from Admiral Chun, Captain. Operation Debt Collection is authorized to commence in 28 hours, 37 minutes. Acknowledged. Continue monitoring. And prepare a message probe for transmission to the Kepler internment camps. When we move, I want the original inhabitants to know they're being liberated, not conquered. Rodriguez turned to her tactical officer. What's the estimated value of the stolen minerals? Conservative estimate, based on current galactic market prices? 400 billion credits over 50 years of operation. And the value of the destroyed ecosystems? Incalculable. 3 worlds that will never recover. Dozens of species extinct. Billions of years of evolution wiped out. Rodriguez felt the familiar cold anger that had sustained her through 3 years of preparation. The hegemony had called it resource development. The reality was systematic destruction on a scale that dwarfed any crime in known history. What about the defense fleet crews? Standard hegemony military, most likely unaware of the illegal nature of the operations. They've been told they're protecting legitimate mining interests. Rules of engagement: disable when possible, destroy when necessary. Priority is stopping the crimes, not punishing the ignorant. Rodriguez appreciated the distinction. Humanity's anger was focused and precise. They weren't interested in indiscriminate revenge, but they were absolutely committed to justice. The difference would become important in the hours ahead. Meanwhile, in the Vorthan Collective's slave trafficking network, Captain Kim's destroyer flotilla was conducting the most complex rescue operation in military history. 43 ships scattered across 7 systems, each one carrying cargo that represented someone's child, parent, or beloved. The logistics of simultaneous liberation were staggering, but humanity had learned to think in terms of systems and networks rather than individual battles. Captain, his intelligence officer reported, "We've confirmed the cargo manifests. The trafficking vessels are carrying 12,417 sentient beings. Ages range from infant to elderly. Species representation includes humans, which explains how we got involved in this investigation initially." Kim felt his jaw clench. Some of the slaves were human, taken from border colonies that had been listed as lost to natural disasters in official records. The discovery had been what triggered humanity's deeper investigation into galactic crime networks. What's the tactical situation? The trafficking vessels are lightly armed, converted freighters. No significant military escort. The challenge will be ensuring the safety of the cargo during boarding operations. Boarding operations have been rehearsed extensively. Our Marines know what they're doing. Kim's Marines were specialists in non-lethal boarding techniques, trained to secure hostile vessels without harming innocent prisoners. They had been practicing for 3 years, using simulations based on detailed intelligence about Vorthan ship designs and security protocols. Estimated value of the trafficking network. Based on the prices we've documented, approximately 1.2 trillion credits in annual revenue. The operation has been running for at least 70 years. Kim did the mathematics quickly. 84 trillion credits in stolen lives, not counting the countless victims who hadn't survived to be rescued. The scale of the crime was breathtaking, and the fact that it had continued with council knowledge made it infinitely worse. Signal from the Admiral. We're 27 hours from execution. Acknowledged. Continue monitoring. And prepare the liberation broadcasts. When we move, I want every slave in the network to know that help has arrived. The countdown continued across human space as forces moved into final positions. Task Force Gamma was monitoring the Setian Empire's genocide sites. Task Force Delta was tracking money laundering operations, and a dozen other task forces were positioning themselves to strike at the heart of galactic corruption. But the most important element of Operation Debt Collection wasn't military at all. It was legal. Judge Advocate General Patricia Walsh sat in her command center aboard the HMS Justice, reviewing the largest legal case in galactic history. For 3 years, humanity's best legal minds have been building an airtight prosecution of galactic civilization itself. Every piece of evidence had been verified, every legal precedent researched, and every potential defense anticipated. Status of the indictments? She asked her staff. Complete. We have formal charges against 473 individuals representing 37 species. Crimes include genocide, slavery, theft, conspiracy, money laundering, and violation of treaties. Supporting evidence includes 12 petabytes of financial records, 40,000 hours of video testimony, and forensic evidence from 17 different crime scenes. Defense capabilities? Limited. Most of the accused have relied on council authority and political connections rather than legal preparation. They're not equipped for adversarial proceedings based on evidence rather than influence. Timeline for prosecution? If we can maintain control of the proceedings, 6 months for the major cases. 12 months for complete resolution of all charges. Walsh nodded. The legal component was just as important as the military one. Humanity wasn't just planning to stop the crimes. They were planning to prosecute them according to galactic law. It was a distinction that would prove crucial in maintaining legitimacy during the chaos ahead. And the compensation calculations? Complete. Total damages owed to victims of identified crimes. 47 trillion galactic credits. That's before interest, punitive damages, or restoration costs. The number was staggering, representing roughly half the total wealth of galactic civilization. But humanity had done the mathematics carefully. The crimes had been profitable precisely because the costs had been externalized onto the victims. It was time for the perpetrators to pay the full price. Admiral Chen's timeline puts us at 26 hours until commencement. Are we ready? The legal framework is prepared. The moment our forces secure the evidence sites, we can begin formal proceedings. The galaxy is about to discover what real justice looks like. Back in the council chambers, the emergency session had devolved into open accusations and recriminations. Species that had been allies for centuries were pointing fingers at each other, desperately trying to minimize their own culpability by exposing others' crimes. The careful diplomatic protocols that had maintained peace were crumbling as the truth emerged. High Chancellor Zektar watched the dissolution of galactic order with growing despair. The humans had done more than threaten the Council. They had exposed the fundamental corruption that had allowed the Council to function. without the profits from illegal activities, without the ability to silence inconvenient witnesses, without the protection of institutional authority, the entire structure was collapsing. Status of our military response? He asked his military advisor. First battle group will be in position in 15 hours. However, we still have no confirmed intelligence on human force dispositions. Our sensors haven't detected any significant military buildup in human space. That's impossible. You can't hide a fleet large enough to threaten galactic civilization. Unless, the advisor hesitated. Unless they've developed stealth technology beyond our current detection capabilities. The humans have always been innovative in military applications. Zektar considered this. Humanity's brief military history was filled with examples of technological innovation driven by necessity. They had developed spaceflight through warfare, mastered faster-than-light communication through military requirements, and created artificial intelligence systems to support combat operations. If they had been secretly developing military technology for 3 years, the results could be formidable. What about their demands? Can we meet them? The financial reparations alone would bankrupt most member species. The prosecutions they're demanding would eliminate the current leadership of 17 different civilizations. The territorial concessions would restructure the entire galactic map. In other words, they're demanding the complete transformation of galactic civilization. Yes, High Chancellor. But based on the evidence they provided, their demands are legally justified under existing galactic law. That was the trap, Zektar realized. Humanity wasn't threatening to destroy galactic civilization through conquest or chaos. They were threatening to enforce it according to its own stated principles. The rules had always existed. They had simply been ignored when it was convenient for the powerful species to do so. Now, humanity was demanding that the rules apply equally to everyone, and the results would be revolutionary. 24 hours, Zektar muttered. 24 hours until we discover whether humanity is bluffing or if they're actually capable of enforcing their demands. And if they're not bluffing? Zektar looked around the chaos of the council chambers, where the representatives of galactic civilization were tearing each other apart in their rush to avoid accountability. Then, the galaxy as we know it is about to end, and something else is about to begin. The countdown continued, and across human space, the largest military operation in their species' history moved toward its climax. 47 trillion credits in debt was about to be collected, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity decided to balance the books. The time for payment was almost due, and humanity had come to collect. The Galactic Court of Justice on Luna Station had never hosted a trial of this magnitude. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate representatives from every known species, had been expanded twice to handle the unprecedented number of defendants, witnesses, and observers. The prosecution alone required 12 separate legal teams working around the clock to present evidence that spanned 70 years and involved crimes against hundreds of species. Judge Arbitrator Veltar of the Altarian Consensus stood at the center of the chamber, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. The Altarians were one of the few species that had remained genuinely neutral throughout galactic history, their commitment to pure logic making them ideal arbitrators for complex legal proceedings. "This court is now in session," Veltar announced, her words translated simultaneously into 3,000 different languages. "The case before us is unprecedented in scope and implication. We are here to determine whether systematic corruption has undermined the legal foundation of galactic civilization itself." The prosecution table was a study in organized determination. Judge Advocate General Patricia Walsh led a team of humanity's finest legal minds, supported by massive holographic displays showing evidence that had taken 3 years to compile. Behind them sat the representatives of victim species, many appearing in court for the first time in their civilization's histories. The defense table told a different story. High Chancellor Zektar sat with the best legal representation that galactic civilization could provide, but their body language spoke of men and women who knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence against them was overwhelming, documented in excruciating detail, and verified by multiple independent sources. The prosecution may present its opening statement. Judge Arbitrator Veltar announced. Patricia Walsh rose slowly, her movements deliberate and confident. She had prepared for this moment for 3 years, and every word had been carefully chosen for maximum impact. Your Honor, the evidence before this court documents the systematic corruption of galactic civilization over the past 7 decades. What we will prove is not simply a collection of individual crimes, but a coordinated effort to subvert the very laws that this court exists to uphold. She gestured to the holographic displays, which activated to show a massive network diagram. Lines connected species to crimes, crimes to cover-ups, and cover-ups to the highest levels of galactic government. The defendants will claim that these were isolated incidents, regrettable but not systemic. The evidence shows otherwise. Every crime was known to council leadership. Every cover-up was coordinated through official channels. Every victim who sought justice was silenced through institutional authority. The displays shifted to show financial records that trace the flow of stolen wealth through the galactic economy. Trillions of credits have been laundered through official channels, disguised as legitimate trade, and used to fund operations that violated every principle of sentient rights. The hegemony mining operations that destroyed 17 worlds and enslaved their populations. The Vorthan collective trafficking network that stole over 40 million sentient beings. The Setian Empire genocide programs that murdered entire refugee populations. These were not independent criminal enterprises. They were coordinated elements of a system designed to exploit the weak while protecting the powerful. Walsh paused, allowing the weight of her accusations to settle before continuing. But the most damning evidence is not the crimes themselves. It is the institutional response when those crimes were reported. For 3 years, humanity followed proper procedures. We filed reports, requested investigations, and presented evidence to council oversight committees. The response was systematic suppression, bureaucratic obstruction, and ultimately an attempt to blame humanity for the very crimes we were trying to expose. The chamber was completely silent as Walsh activated another set of displays. These showed the paper trail of humanity's attempts to work within the system, documenting every ignored report and buried investigation. Your Honor, this court must decide whether galactic law applies equally to all species or whether some beings are simply too powerful to be held accountable. The evidence before you represents the largest criminal conspiracy in known history. The defendants did not merely commit crimes. They corrupted the very system meant to prevent those crimes. Walsh returned to her seat as the implications of her words echoed through the chamber. This wasn't just a criminal trial. It was a judgment on the fundamental legitimacy of galactic civilization itself. The defense may present its opening statement. Judge Arbitrator Veltar announced. Defense Counsel Kithran of the hegemony rose slowly, his reptilian features carefully composed to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. He was considered one of the finest legal minds in galactic space, but he was facing an impossible task. Your Honor, my clients stand accused of crimes that span decades and involve complex political situations that cannot be reduced to simple legal formulas. The prosecution would have this court believe that galactic civilization is built on corruption, but they ignore the peace, prosperity, and progress that has been achieved under council leadership. He gestured to his own displays, which showed statistics about galactic economic growth, reduced conflicts between species, and technological advancement during the period in question. Yes, mistakes were made. Yes, some individuals exceeded their authority and committed regrettable acts. But to characterize the entire council system as a criminal conspiracy is both legally unfounded and practically destructive. Kithran's argument was polished and professional, but it faced a fundamental problem. The evidence was too comprehensive to dismiss as isolated incidents. The prosecution had documented systematic patterns that span multiple species and decades of time. The humans present themselves as innocent victims, but they have provided no context for their own actions. They speak of following proper procedures, but they have conducted military operations that violated the sovereignty of dozens of member species. They demand accountability from others while refusing to submit to oversight themselves. It was a reasonable argument, but it fell apart immediately when Walsh activated another display showing the legal authorization for every human military action. Every operation had been conducted under emergency provisions of galactic law that required action when evidence of ongoing crimes existed. Furthermore, Kithran continued, the prosecution's demands would destroy the stability that has maintained galactic peace for centuries. The remedy they propose is worse than the alleged disease. Judge Arbitrator Veltar raised a crystalline appendage. Defense counsel, please clarify. Are you arguing that the alleged crimes did not occur, or that prosecuting them would be inadvisable? The question cut to the heart of the defense's impossible position. They couldn't deny the evidence, but admitting the crimes would effectively concede the case. Your Honor, we argue that the complex political realities of galactic governance sometimes require actions that might appear questionable in isolation, but serve the greater good of maintaining peace and stability. So the crimes occurred, but were justified by political necessity? Kithran realized he had just destroyed his own case. Your Honor, we maintain that the actions in question were within the legal authority of the parties involved. Based on what legal authority? The silence stretched on as Kithran frantically consulted his legal databases. The truth was that no legal authority existed for the crimes documented by the prosecution. The defendants had acted outside the law and used institutional power to avoid accountability. We request time to research the relevant statutes. Judge Arbitrator Veltar's crystalline form shifted into patterns that indicated deep disapproval. Defense counsel, this court has been provided with 3,000 pages of legal research from the prosecution documenting the illegal nature of the actions in question. If you cannot provide legal justification for your client's actions, please proceed to the facts of the case. The trial's first day had already established the fundamental weakness of the defense position. They couldn't deny the crimes, couldn't justify them legally, and couldn't challenge the evidence. Their only remaining strategy was to minimize the scope and argue for reduced sentences. The second day began with witness testimony from the victims. Kaliseth had been born in the Kepler internment camps, raised in slavery, and told that his situation was natural and permanent. When he stood before the court to testify about 50 years of captivity, his words carried the weight of institutional cruelty that could no longer be ignored. They told us that our people had been relocated for our own safety, he said through the translation matrix. They said the mining operations were necessary for galactic prosperity. They said that our sacrifice was serving the greater good. Kaliseth's testimony was supported by holographic evidence from the camps themselves. Generations of beings living in conditions that violated every principle of sentient rights while their homeworld was strip-mined for profit. When human ships arrived, we thought it was another work detail. We had been told that no one would ever come for us, that we had been forgotten. When they said we were free, most of us didn't understand what the word meant. His words were echoed by thousands of other victims. Slaves who had been trafficked for decades, refugees who had survived systematic genocide attempts, entire species who had been exploited and then silenced when they tried to seek justice. The prosecution presented witness after witness, each one representing millions of similar cases. The cumulative impact was overwhelming. This wasn't isolated criminality. It was systematic exploitation on a scale that dwarfed any crime in known history. But the most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Former Council Intelligence Director Yithran took the stand on the trial's third day, his testimony protected by immunity agreements that guaranteed his safety in exchange for complete disclosure. Your Honor, I supervised intelligence operations for the Council for 37 years. My job was to monitor threats to galactic stability and recommend appropriate responses. Yithran's testimony was supported by classified Council documents that had been seized during Operation Debt Collection. The intelligence archives painted a picture of systematic corruption that went far beyond what even the prosecution had suspected. The crimes documented by the prosecution were not only known to Council leadership. They were coordinated through official intelligence channels. We maintained files on every illegal operation, every cover-up, and every attempt by victim species to seek justice. Judge Arbitrator Veltar leaned forward. Are you saying that the Council actively participated in these crimes? Yes, Your Honor. More than participated. We organized them. The mining operations, trafficking networks, and genocide programs were not independent criminal enterprises. They were coordinated elements of a single system designed to maintain Council authority through economic control and selective elimination of inconvenient populations. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates collapsed, others began screaming, and the gallery erupted in chaos that required security intervention to contain. When order was restored, Yithran continued his testimony. The humans were targeted because they began asking the right questions. Their investigation threatened to expose the entire system. The decision was made to eliminate them as a threat by framing them for our own crimes. And when that failed, we planned military action, complete annihilation of human civilization disguised as enforcement of Council authority. The operation was scheduled to commence 1 week after their deadline expired. Judge Arbitrator Veltar's crystalline form flickered with patterns that indicated extreme agitation. You planned genocide against an entire species to cover up previous crimes? Yes, Your Honor. It was considered a necessary action to preserve galactic stability. The admission reverberated through galactic space. Real-time broadcasts were carrying the trial to every world in known space, and the reaction was immediate and violent. Riots broke out in 17 systems. 3 species declared independence from Council authority. The Galactic Stock Exchange collapsed as investors realized the scope of the corruption. But the most important reaction came from the human observers in the gallery. Admiral Chun sat with the other members of humanity's delegation, her expression carefully neutral as she listened to testimony that confirmed everything they had suspected. Behind her, the representatives of victim species watched with expressions ranging from vindication to horror as the full scope of the crimes against them was revealed. Admiral, Commander Webb whispered, we're receiving urgent communications from human colonies throughout Council space. Local authorities are demanding immediate surrender of human citizens for protective custody. Chin's expression didn't change. Signal all human citizens in Council space. Evacuation Protocol 7. All personnel have 24 hours to reach human territory or designated safe zones. And if they refuse to let our people leave, then they'll discover what happens when you take hostages from species that's already at war. The trial continued, but everyone present knew that the legal proceedings had become secondary to the larger crisis unfolding across galactic space. The evidence was overwhelming, the guilt was undeniable, and the implications were revolutionary. On the trial's 4th day, the prosecution presented its final piece of evidence, a complete financial analysis of galactic civilization's economy. Your Honor, Patricia Walsh announced, we have calculated the total value stolen through the criminal operations documented in this trial. The amount, including interest and punitive damages, is 47 trillion galactic credits. The number was staggering, representing roughly half the total wealth of known space. But Walsh wasn't finished. We have also calculated the defendant's ability to pay these damages based on assets seized during Operation Debt Collection. Frozen accounts, confiscated vessels, and secured facilities contain approximately 51 trillion credits in recoverable assets. The implications were clear. The criminals had been so successful that their accumulated wealth actually exceeded the damages they owed. Justice wasn't just possible, it was profitable. The prosecution therefore requests that this court order complete restitution to all victims, immediate dissolution of the current council structure, and establishment of new galactic institutions based on actual legal equality rather than institutional corruption. Judge Arbitrator Veltar was silent for several minutes, her crystalline form shifting through patterns that indicated complex calculation. When she finally spoke, her words would reshape galactic civilization. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds the defendants guilty of systematic corruption, conspiracy to commit genocide, violation of sentient rights accords, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The scope and duration of these crimes represent the largest criminal conspiracy in known history. She paused, allowing her words to echo through the chamber and across galactic space. The prosecution's calculation of damages is accepted as accurate. The defendants are hereby ordered to pay complete restitution to all victims, totaling 47 trillion galactic credits plus court costs. The chamber erupted again, but Veltar was not finished. Furthermore, this court finds that the systematic nature of these crimes has undermined the legal foundation of current galactic institutions. The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved pending establishment of new institutions based on actual legal equality. High Chancellor Zektar rose slowly, his massive form trembling with rage and despair. Your Honor, this court does not have the authority to dissolve the council. We are the supreme authority in galactic civilization. Former High Chancellor, Veltar corrected, you were the supreme authority. That authority was based on legal legitimacy that your actions have destroyed. This court's jurisdiction derives from the same legal foundation that created the council. Having violated that foundation through systematic criminality, you no longer possess legitimate authority. The legal revolution was complete. The court had not simply punished the criminals. It had dissolved the institutional structure that had made their crimes possible. But the most important moment was yet to come. This court recognizes the Human Defense Force's actions as lawful enforcement of galactic legal principles. All military operations conducted under Operation Debt Collection are hereby validated as necessary responses to ongoing criminal activity. Admiral Chun stood slowly, her expression finally showing emotion for the first time during the trial. Your Honor, on behalf of humanity and all victim species, we accept the court's judgment. Judge Arbitrator Veltar's crystalline form shifted into patterns that indicated formal pronouncement. Let the record show that justice has been served. The debt has been paid, the criminals have been punished, and galactic civilization will be rebuilt on a foundation of actual law rather than institutional corruption. The gavel fell, and galactic civilization as it had existed for centuries officially ended. But something new was about to begin. Outside Luna Station, human ships were already moving to secure the assets needed to pay the 47 trillion credit judgment. The galaxy's victims would finally receive compensation for their suffering. The criminals would face the consequences of their actions. And humanity had proven that when a debt was owed, they would collect it, no matter how long it took or how powerful the debtors thought they were. The galaxy had learned to fear the sound of humans keeping score. Now, they were about to learn what happened when the bill finally came due 5 years after the trial of galactic civilization. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood once again in what had once been the council chambers on Nexus Prime. The crystal amphitheater remained unchanged, but everything else was different. Instead of the elaborate displays of wealth and power that had characterized the old council, the new galactic assembly operated with stark efficiency, focused on actual governance rather than institutional corruption. The delegates were different too. Many of the old species leadership had been replaced during the restructuring that followed the trial. The new representatives were chosen for competence and integrity rather than political connections or ability to ignore inconvenient crimes. Some were former victims who had survived the old system's cruelties. Others were reformers who had spent careers fighting corruption from within their own governments. The Restitution Commission has completed its final report, Elena announced to the assembled delegates. Her role had evolved from diplomatic envoy to something unprecedented, the galaxy's chief debt collector. For 5 years, she had overseen the largest financial recovery operation in known history. The holographic displays that activated throughout the chamber showed statistics that would have been unimaginable under the old system. 47 trillion credits in damages had been paid to victims of systematic crimes. 12,417 beings have been rescued from slavery and returned to their homelands. 2.1 million genocide victims have been properly memorialized and their families compensated. The Kepler system has been fully restored, Elena continued. The mining equipment has been removed, the internment camps have been replaced with modern cities, and the original inhabitants have been granted full sovereignty over their homeworld. Economic development programs have raised their standard of living to galactic average levels. In the gallery, Kalaseth sat with the delegation from Kepler Prime. The being who had been born in slavery was now serving as his world's representative to the